Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. We do our best to make it worth your while. My name is Azrin. I'm an academic and urban designer based at UTM KL. I'm also a member of Preka Banda, the Malaysian Urban Design Association. So, welcome to Preka Banda's first urban talk webinar. The Urban Talk series is where we engage with experts, activists, residents, basically anyone who's actively involved in the making and shaping of our built environment. In this first episode, we will be discussing how COVID-19 affects public spaces and how public spaces can be adapted to the conditions imposed by the pandemic. As urban designers, we very rarely work on our own. What we do is informed and intersects with other disciplines depending on the problems that we want to solve. So for this particular problem, we want to look at it from the perspective of how public health concerns and urban mobility can inform urban designers to prepare and adapt our public spaces so they can still be used, but at the same time, minimizing the risk of transmission of the virus. We will be talking to retired Professor of Urban Design from UTM, Dr. Shwana Samsudin, Professor Datuk Lokman Hakim Sulaiman, Public Health Professor at the International Medical University, and Dr. Sharia Bachok, a public transport expert from the International Islamic University of Malaysia. So, this is the structure of today's event. Each speaker gets 15 minutes to present their insights. I will briefly introduce the speaker before their presentations. To those viewing on Facebook Live, please post your questions in the chat box. We will collect all questions and post them to the speakers for a discussion after all presentations are done. Okay? I will now introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Shwana Samsudin, who was a professor in urban design from University Technology Malaysia. She has more than 30 years of experience in researching urban design issues, and she was also involved in many urban design consultation projects, both locally and internationally. She was part of the expert group of UN Habitat's City Prosperity Index. She was also the lead consultant for the Kuala Lumpur Heritage Trail Master Plan 2015 to 2020 for the BKL. Dr. Shwana will first take a few minutes to introduce Preka Banda, after which she will share her insights about the topic at hand. So, Dr. Shwana, the floor is yours.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Azrin, for that introduction. As President of Preka Banda, Malaysian Urban Design Association, I would like to say thank you to our distinguished speakers who are willing to join us in our first webinar, and we hope that this will be the first of a more exciting series of webinars that we plan for the society. As we are a newly formed society, we are practically an NGO that was established prior to the movement control order in March 2020. So actually it's either timely or untimely. I think our appearance in the landscape of non-government association in the country will hope to bring some benefits to the society, especially with regards to the quality of our built environment. As an NGO, we are an alliance of multidisciplinary professionals who have one common mission, which is to champion for good urban design practice in the country. We aspire to be the voice to the demand for better design cities in the country, and also to ensure that urban design is given more emphasis in the way we develop and build our cities. For everyone's information, urban design is a field of expertise which bridges the gap between architecture and town planning. Many are not aware actually what is urban design and why urban design is actually very important in the way we build cities. Because as a developing country, our focus is more on the planning and development of the country, and also we have our architects responsible to actually translate the planning policies into the built form. Now, why urban design is important? And because it bridges the gap between the plans that has been proposed by the planners for any cities, which is the plans are actually in the form of written statements, two-dimensional in nature, um, and there is no indication of the quality or the appearance of the build form that is going to take place as a result of the plans. It is up to the architects to translate these policies into the build form. But the architects, on the other hand, is responsible for the development, the designing the building on the site given to them by their client, and therefore this client relationship with the client sometimes makes the architects have to compromise on many aspects of design in order to fulfill the needs or the requests of the clients. Then this is where the problem occurs. In the developing country, the emphasis is more to actually guide and coordinate development, not just in the form of activities that will take place, but also in terms of the design quality that is going to appear. And the problem in Malaysia is that we do not have that person who's bridging that gap, the one who is going to translate all the planning policies and to inform the architects on how to design the building on the site in order so that there will be a coordinated design for the whole city. And if you look at the structure of the local authority, the way how development control takes place, we also have lack design control in the planning submission process, whereby only types of development, density, and very technical issues were checked and assessed before planning permission is given, but very rarely quality of design and the way the design fit in with the whole area or the city at large is being done. And for that reason, we see that the problems in Malaysia, we have very poor design quality, and also cities that lack in terms of identity and sense of place if we compare to the other cities in the developed world. So because due to that, that's why we feel the need to have a society like Preka Bandar to act as the one who's going to champion this and to ensure that more emphasis be given to the quality of design in order to improve the quality of life of the urban dwellers. Now, as a non-professional body, we are not here to regulate the profession. There is no profession of an urban designer. So our role is more like the Urban Design Group in United Kingdom, or the Urban Design Alliance of Australia, where we see ourselves as becoming the platform for intellectual discourse, training, and source of information with regards to urban design in the country, in order to improve the quality of life and the quality of the environment of our cities. There are 4 objectives of the society which actually guides the way we operate as an association. Firstly is to champion good urban design as important field of expertise in order to improve the design of the urban areas, and which actually affect the quality of life of our residents. Like I mentioned earlier, this emphasis is not there. We hope that by our presence and by our voice, we would encourage more of the professionals involved in the built environment to be trained in urban design in order to improve the quality of service provided. Secondly, we also intend to promote high standards of urban design practice and placemaking in order to create cities with identity and sense of place. This is we are seeing a trend whereby our cities are places that is everywhere and nowhere image. So this is actually not strange, because it is quite typical of cities in the global south or the developing world, whereby we tend to build buildings in order to fulfill certain functions, but because the development happens so fast that we haven't had enough time to think of the aspects of quality in the design and the appearance of the city until it's already being built. Now, our third objective is to educate and create awareness amongst the public and the relevant professionals in matters relating to urban design. From my experience of doing research about urban design and to benchmark Malaysia with countries like UK, United States, Australia, and Japan, I noticed that we are very much behind as far as urban design is concerned. I remember in one of the discussion with the local authorities in Birmingham, and when I presented to them the situation in the country and what's happening in UK, we are about 50 or 60 years behind the developing world in the way we build and design our cities. So much so that we are not really learning from the mistakes that has been done in the developed world, and then leapfrog into the future by actually learning from this mistake and designing better quality cities. So there is actually a missed opportunity on that aspect. So we hope that by our presence, we will provide the opportunity to educate and to train, giving skills to the existing professionals, so that we can get better quality services from them. Finally, our role is to advocate for sustainable design of public spaces and places, and also to make sure that the places and spaces that has been designed in the country is responsive to the traditions, the our culture, our cultural background, our climate, our environmental, and our community needs. This is very sad that many of our historic places are now being turned into cities with no character and identity, and we do not want the future generation to actually not knowing what used to be our culture and our tradition in the way we build our cities. And in due to that, with our presence, we hope that with our concern for good urban design, it will actually help the relevant authorities, organizations, professions involved to actually consolidate and work together towards building better quality cities for Malaysia. So I would okay, if moderator, I will next go to my presentation of looking into post pandemic public spaces from urban design perspectives. Before going into these issues of post pandemic public spaces, urban spaces is one of the key emphasis of any urban design exercise, because the urban spaces is actually the face of the city. If we look at a person, normally the face of the person is the one that gives the identity to a person, and the one that makes people remember the person most. And as far as the cities are concerned, the urban spaces, namely the key streets and squares, are the one that actually playing this role. They are actually, if you look, the analogy is that the streets are like the corridors in a building. The squares are the internal rooms of the city. In Malaysia, we don't have squares like we have in the European countries, a formal space which is hard surface for its flooring. But we do have a legacy from the British occupation of the country through the padang. The padang is actually an enclosed space, but compared to the squares, they are turf. That means because when the British designed the padang for any city that they occupy, it's actually for the purpose of playing cricket, and also to meet the recreation and the leisure needs of the people. So that's why you will see that many cities built by during the colonial times will have the padang as its centerpiece. Now, okay, back to the issue of public space. What is actually meant by public space? Uh, um, in Malaysia, said to say why I'm discussing what I want to discuss before I go into what is been done post pandemic is what actually happened to our cities prior to this pandemic, COVID-19. How do we build our cities that makes that this pandemic is actually creating lots of problem to us. Prior to the uh, COVID-19 pandemic, we are focusing more in terms of our planning our cities in terms of distribution of the land use activities and the communication lines, and also to decide on what kind of development should take place in the city. And then the architect's role was actually to translate all these policies into the built form, and the emphasis, if you look now, is more going into the green building design as a result of this sustainable development goals agenda of the United Nations. But one thing that creates problem to us, not just to the public, is actually the lack of public spaces being provided. Uh, that 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 meant that the quality of life of our urban dwellers is significantly affected, especially for those low income group or the urban poor who has to live in a very crowded situation and very congested situation where access to the public spaces is minimum. Now, not that apart from having lacking of public spaces for to meet the needs, the recreational needs of the citizens, there is also the issue of accessibility and the quality of design. Now, having very large parks, for example, we have in the city centre of KL, for example, we have the Tasik Perdana, Taman Tasik Perdana, and then lately Taman Tasik Titi Mosra, which are world class recreational parks as a result of this development. But what is the problem is that there is only very two large parks, and the whole the population is actually relying on this in two major public space for their recreation needs. If you even before this MCO was lifted, try to go to these two parks in the weekends. You will not have the very relaxing time, but you'll be very stressful because of the congestion and the crowded nature and the problem of getting car parking facilities in order to take your family to have a leisure time in those parks. So you can imagine what happened after the MCO was lifted. These parks were crowded so much so that they have to close down the parks in order to avoid for another cluster to be generated as a result of people now, after being locked down for several months. The park is the first place that they targeted. That is very human nature. And the concern here is because COVID-19 pandemic is actually for us urbanites, it actually exposed the problem of the way we design our cities. There is some lack of emphasis that to meet the mental to ensure that the mental health and the well-being of the city dwellers are being taken care of in the way we plan and design our cities. And then another aspect that I always, I mean, this is not my first involved. In the previous interviews with the media, I also said that the COVID-19 pandemic is actually a blessing in disguise. for us who are involved in this business of building the cities, because it gives us time now to reflect back. What have we what cities are we giving to the what kind of cities are we giving to the public, in the sense that the COVID-19 is actually making it worse in terms of the quality of life for people living in the city. We have been focusing too much on building commercial development in the cities. Too many shopping malls and shopping complexes were being built. Many office buildings and tower blocks, and sometimes you see the occupancy rate of the hotels, and so it's very low. And yet they are given prime sites in the cities. And when it comes to public spaces, we are very very stringent in the way we allocate the kind of sites that normally at times it just leftover spaces are being given to become public spaces. One very glaring problem is the KLCC Park. KLCC Park used to be very attractive to people with families, because there are many facilities being provided for children's, and then and also people who wants to enjoy jogging and so forth. But what happens is that the KLCC Park becomes less and less in terms of size, because more and more commercial developments are being built that tend to shrink the only space that is public space available in the city centre. So this is actually a moral obligation of the city fathers, actually, to provide for the needs, the leisure and recreation needs for the citizens, not just to fulfill the needs of the developers, and also to encourage speculative development. So we have oversupply of shopping malls, that sometimes some malls cannot even get open because there's no takers to the tenants. One very very classic case is Lot 1 in Johor Bahru. Is it no Lot 10 or Lot 1? Well, at the waterfront, it ended up becoming just one lot because it never get open. So okay, I've got some limited time. Another aspect, that our streets are also not walkable, and they are not they're actually practically roads, just a place where the vehicles go from one place to another, and there's no rooms to walk. And that's why with this post pandemic issue, we cannot walk very close to each other. And our very few streets have sidewalks. Only I think Jalan Tuanku Draman, for example, have a very wide sidewalks that enable people to walk with a safe social distance with each other. So with these post-pandemic issues, now it's time that for us to reflect back on how we can actually give back some of the spaces that we have given to the cars and the vehicles for the publics to walk. For example, utilizing the large car parks to allow petty traders to apply the trades, like the farmers market that's been done in Los Angeles and so forth. And also to reuse and also to review back all the lost spaces that we have in the cities. For example, spaces underneath the elevated highways, spaces alongside the railway lines and the rivers. So there should be a review back for all so to encourage more of these spaces to be converted for public use, and also to increase the access to the public. Have I got time?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. That what I've been mentioning now is more of a short-term measures, but in the long term, we have to sit down when we design our city to incorporate urban design in the part of in the process of building our city, so that we have also quality, not just quantity in the facilities being provided. We also need an urban design framework following any plans that has been prepared, so that we can design the cities and to look into these issues of public spaces that I have been mentioning, in the sense that there should be a hierarchy of urban spaces being provided, and each hierarchy of the spaces will comes a kind of function that you require it to be, and with this function then only you can design for better quality urban spaces. I'm not talking about, I have no time, but actually the situation gets worse in the residential area, in the urban residential area, whereby children have no place to go and play, and they end up being stuck indoors and playing computer games, which is actually not good for children's our future generation. Um, if I don't have time, I think with that I just stop for a while. Thank you.
Thank you for complying with the time limit. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned KLCC Park as an example because, I mean, KLCC Park is also a commercial space, right? It's owned by Petronas, right? So I find that very interesting. We can discuss that later. So I will now introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is Professor Dato Dr. Lokman Hakim Sulaiman, who is a professor of public health at the International Medical University, Kuala Lumpur. He served 32 years in the Ministry of Health, 18 of which as a researcher at the Institute of Medical Research, Kuala Lumpur. His last position before his retirement from civil service was as the Deputy Director General of Health, with a focus on public health. He has served in various capacities at the World Health Organization, of which the most recent one is as a member of the WHO Advisory Group Pandemic Influenza Preparedness Framework from 2017 to 2019 and from 2020 to 2021. So, Prof. Lokman, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nurul. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me. As far as I remember, as a public health professional, this is the first time I've ever had any interaction with your profession, internal, so-called the urban planners, in any intellectual discourse. I think it's very important for us to actually work together in many aspects of urban planning. COVID-19 is just an eye opener probably to have a look and rethink how we actually work together as a profession for the betterment of the public. Okay, just as a brief introduction, I would like to touch a little bit about the concept about health, wellness, and mindfulness, because I thought these are very important concepts that need to be understood. WHO defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. It's a very, very broad, comprehensive definition, uh, which has remains unchanged since the conceptions of the World Health Assembly in 1947. So, I mean, it has remained as such. But now, more and more broad concept of wellness has come into becoming more important. People are already talking, I mean, the importance of this wellness concept, and before you actually end up in a disease state. So if when we say health is a state of the current being, what our condition at the present moment, wellness, we are talking about the state of living and how uh, we lead our life towards a healthy lifestyle. Uh, because even those people who are already experiencing some form of diseases, they can still lead a so-called healthy lifestyle in order to maintain their physical health. And mental health is a very important aspect nowadays. I mean, people more and more countries are giving more emphasis on these problems of mental health, and the concept of mindfulness has come into the picture. In fact, um, some of the healthcare system in the world are already uh, um, recognizing this important aspect of mindfulness. I mean, you don't have at the state when you are still not having a problem, or a state that is still growing up to in your life. Uh, Many situations around your living influence your mental health. And in United Kingdom, for example, the National Health Service has started giving attention to this issue of mindfulness. I mean, creating a living, working environment that actually help in your mental health, paying more attention at what you are facing at the present moment. And this is some, I think, has very much relevant when we are talking about the urban planning for the wellness of the nation. Now, COVID-19, why this has become a major public international concern? Simply because this infection is novel, new, simply because it is very infectious and it spread very easily. You just imagine within 5 months, the entire globe is being affected. It doesn't recognize any geographical boundaries. It doesn't need passport or visa to enter to any country, right? And it doesn't um, recognize social cultural background. Whether you rich or poor, everybody is affected. But apparently, some form of parameters are important in determining how this infection spread and impact the population. Population density, one of it is a very important aspect. But again, social cultural behavior, I mean, is also very important in determining how the infection spread in country. Developing country and as whole, I mean, shows very forms of transmission dynamic. In Europe, they are much better off compared to the United States. Probably because I don't know. I mean, it looks like the Americans they are very strong with this. What does they call it? The human right. Yeah, personal individual right. We even challenge the authorities about some of the initiatives taken by government, and it's quite obvious to see that this is the impact of what they're doing. But in some developing countries, of course, like India, Iran, they may have other challenges that, apart from their population densities, that are actually affecting uh, the COVID transmission in their countries. Another aspect about COVID is it kills. The number of deaths globally has been increasingly in a very exponential way. Um, we, I was very intrigued by this particular statistic by Worldometer, where they compare the top 20 cause of death when COVID first appeared in January. In February, COVID lay down at the bottom of the top 20 cause of death, but it rapidly increased itself. And within just 5 months, by May, they already number 4 as the top of death. And as of July, last week, they already number 3 as the top cause of death in the world. But of course, they selected 20 causes of death, excluding some of the more important causes of death like cardiovascular, cancers, and other, which is causing a lot much more. But this, the importance of this is to reflect that COVID is a nasty disease, something, a very serious disease that can actually create havoc, especially in countries where aging is a major issue, where the proportion of the elderly are very high. But in countries like us, we have other problems. Our prevalence of non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, chronic, are very high. And these are risk factors for severe COVID infection. In fact, we are considered as a risk country in terms of the damaging effect of COVID to the population health. Well, somehow we did very well in managing COVID as a public health problem so far. We are able to curb the rise of the infection by the MCOs. It's a very aggressive strategy that the government has taken, which has actually shows a very marked impact in stopping the transmission of COVID to such a level that the level of transmission is so low that we are talking about just a single digit number of cases of the last few weeks. But to completely stop the transmission of this infection is almost impossible without the vaccine as well as effective drug to treat the virus. At the present moment, we do not have any drug and that can kill the virus to treat the patient. And this is very important. Treating the patient is very important to remove the virus so that they don't become the source of infection to other person. But we don't have the drug. And that's the reason why we have to isolate these people, put them in quarantine. It's something the public must understand why this is being done. All right. And of course, we do not have the vaccine at the present moment to prevent healthy people from getting infected. But we are already seeing signs that after the government lift up the MCOs and allowing more public activities, that the infections are coming back. Now, this is something that is expected because we can never totally eliminate the virus in the first place. It's there, lying there in the community. All right? But if the public are not careful, this is where resurgence may occur. All right. So, basing on the daily press conference, that is the only um, um, data that I'm accessible to in terms of COVID data information, which is very important source of data. And if you look at the, uh, the, the data that was shared by the Ministry of Health, it shows that the virus is still mingling around in the community somewhere. All right. Although the number of cases are flattening, yes, but interesting to look at the surveillance data by the ministry. Now, the blue curve is the number of cases detected among patients and among people under investigation. Meaning, people under investigation mean those are people who are having the signs and symptoms of fever and cough with history of traveling to affected countries and or history of contact to a positive case. So these are suspected cases in clinically suspected cases. In the early phase, yes, the number of cases increases dramatically, but after we have controlled the situation, it's stabilizing now, but it doesn't really flatten out. It's still growing up slowly. And what's interesting to also to see the red bar, which represent the proxy. The ministry also tests patient who has no history of traveling, no history of having contact to the COVID cases, but presenting with signs symptoms of fever and cough, or they suffer from severe pneumonia. So these people also they are screened for COVID-19, and some of them, quite a number of them, are actually also positive. More interestingly, now after we've lifted the control, is the policy of the Ministry of Health to screen all patients undergoing elective surgery, meaning planned surgery. These are not emergency surgery. These are planned surgery. So before they go into surgery, they will be screened for COVID. Again, among this group of people, you see in this subset graph, every week there are at least 4 or 5 people are positive. And these people, they are everywhere. So you just mean from where are they, they are getting the virus from anywhere possible, from their house, from their work of place, to the public, anywhere. So this is the scenario. This is the situation. All right, the virus are still there. I mean, lying around in the country. We do not know the actual extent of the infection because the strategy of the Ministry of Health is to do targeted screening. They don't do population-based screening. In the early part of the epidemic, I have been suggesting, proposing for us to do a population-based assessment because to get to understand what is the extent of the problem. But I think there are probably reasons why the ministry is targeting this approach. But anyway, I mean, the fact that they are doing the surveillance, this activity, surveillance activity, can actually help to tell us that there's still problem of COVID in, in the community. Well, public space and health. Well, I think this is well-known, accepted norms that in the place we live, we learn, we work, we go for leisure, have great influence on the health of people, be it indoor and outdoor quality. What's important, this environment may affect the route of transmission or the spread of infectious diseases. And then coming back to the concept of space, public space, I mean, Prof. Suhana just now mentioned about defining the public space, about the open space out there where the people can come and access. But within the context of tropical climates, like even our country, I think that the open space definition of really and the public space definition of an open space need to be revisited, I would say, because Malaysian, like for example, our Malaysian, sometimes they treat the indoor environment space, open indoor space, as the public space. That's where they gather their families and place around. The same way how they do it in the open space. So the concept of open space, I think in this part of the world, is very different from what the European concept. So when you are a birth planner, to me, when they look at how they look at the planning of the development, we need to consider indoor space. I mean, public space as part of the concept of a public space. Because I'm even my own children, they will prefer to go to the malls to get with the family rather than going to the park, because they will complain that's very hot and humid and what's not. So I think, and if this happens, certainly the issue of the standard and qualities of this indoor so-called public space may also need to be reconsidered. In terms, I mean, as far as health and standard is concerned, I think there's exists some form of standard, like, but rather quite limited in terms of scope to some environmental, occupational, and traditional public health hazard. Like for example, the house, housing space, the ventilation, and what's not. But there are areas still, despite the fact that their standard been accepted internationally, that we even in the country we are still having a huge problem, like general disease, for example, dengue, for that matter. I don't think in Malaysia we really we talk with them whether we really consider dengue as one public health issues that urban planners have to seriously look into. In Singapore, they have a regulation about the type of plant and flowers that they plant in the public park, because any plants or any flower that collect water will not be allowed in public. So that's the kind of thinking that we probably need to look into. What more about the building design and others? Health input in urban planning, I'm not sure how much priority have been given in this country for that matter. If I'm looking at a profession, I think the engineering professional group has advanced very much in health. It's such that we do have now recognized public health engineers as a profession. Even in the Ministry of Health, we do even have public health engineers in our system. So I'm not sure whether probably we need a group of people, urban planner, public health urban planner. Their basic training is in urban planning, but their subject of interest may further advance into public health and become a public health urban planner. Then I think that will hopefully will strengthen the inputs of of health issues in the planning of urban countries as a whole. Because when we talk about challenges in health in the future, COVID it's not, I must say, that it's not the beginning. It's already been there. We have been having faces challenges of novel infection for many, many years. We have Ebola, we have Nipah, H5N1, SARS, MERS, and it won't stop. I can tell you that you will have another thing will come after COVID. COVID is just a reminder for us to be um, prepared for what the possibility that can happen. This is because of the continued urbanization and diminishing human wildlife boundaries that will create a continuous threat for emerging and novel infection. If you look at this list of the zoonotic infection, diseases of the animals that get into human, Ebola, Nipah, all these are all originated from the animals. So we coming back to COVID, it's a new infection. There's a lot to be learned. We still don't know much about it. But in general, when we talk about any respiratory viruses like COVID and others, for you to mitigate the situation, is you to understand the route of spread. How is this infection being transmitted from person to person? For any respiratory infection, close contact is the first route of transmission. Meaning the infected person must be close enough to the susceptible person to transmit the virus. And then respiratory droplets, particles. When we say respiratory droplets, we are talking about the particles of more than 5 micron. These are quite heavy in the sense, relatively heavy, that it wouldn't last in the air for a long time, and and over a very short distance. Maximum is about 1 meter, and that's the basis for the social distancing of at least 1 meter apart. But when you have a situation of respiratory droplet nuclei, for example, droplet nuclei, where the size is much smaller, less than 5 micron, then there's a potential of airborne. But WHO has again and again emphasized the fact that airborne COVID transmission at the current evidence that we have are quite limited to a very special medical setting. In the situation where the process of treatment generate aerosol that cannot allow the production of this so-called respiratory droplet nuclei. Even that also, it can only travel to up to 4 meters, and pretty well within one ward or one room. It doesn't go and hang in the air in the public spaces like that. I mean, if you go to the park, I mean, if somebody cough out there, the virus doesn't just hang in the air like that. I mean, but unless you are very close together and you are not protected in the form of wearing the mask or what, then the risk of you getting the infection is high. All right. So the
Prof, sorry, can you wrap up? It's you have one.
Yeah, this I'm coming to my last few slides already.
No, Prof, you can take all my time also.
No, it's okay. I'm finishing anyway. So that's the diagrammatic representation of what I'm saying just now. Close contact, meaning you have to be very close together when you're talking to your friend, because when you talk, you will pass out the droplet. So close contact in that sense. That's why social distancing is one of. But if you start wearing your mask, then the risk become reduced, much reduced. So that's why, I mean, it's been initially, WHO is quite consistent initially that if you cannot maintain social distancing, then you wear a mask. And when you are not sure that you can't control your personal environment, then might as well wear a mask. You might think that you'll be walking alone at that moment, but suddenly somebody come and say hello, hi to you, then you don't know. So, I mean, that's the scenario. The format, I mean, people have been talking about this risk of contaminated surfaces. Yes, there are several evidence to show that some of these surfaces are contaminated with this virus. but there's no clear evidence to say that they are the direct cause of the infection. But on precautionary principle, yes, it is advisable to clean all these surfaces.
Mm.
All right. Now, there has been a report about the issue of indoor transmission of what in the restaurant, that particular restaurant using the split aircon unit, and of course the flow, the spread is occurring at where the air is blowing in and out from that aircon. That that's the risk. So in closed environment where um, um, the ventilation plays an important role. Either is a split unit or centralized aircon plays an important aspect in determining the risk of the infection. That's why I'm very critical about some of the measures and issues being taken by the public or the private sector in trying to mitigate uh, this infection without thinking, without using the knowledge of what we know about COVID infection. For example, the disinfectant tunnels. When it first started to be marketed around the country, I came out with this commentary in the newspaper, debunking this concept, because this is totally uh, dangerous, and in fact it gives false sense of security. You are spraying the person in that tunnel, but the virus is inside the throat. How can you assess the virus in the throat? So it's crazy. You come out from that tunnel, you are as infective as before you come to the tunnel. And I was very mad when they started spraying the road and with disinfectant. This is totally, I cannot imagine, because this is supposed to be coordinated response by the government, whole of government. When they started, I mean, when you are in facing with crisis and danger, sometimes you forget common sense. You fail to recognize what's right, what's wrong. Well, I guess I'll stop there. Thank you very much for the time. I'm sorry for taking some of the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Okay, there's much to be discussed after this. So now we'll introduce our final speaker, Dr. Sharia Bachok. She's a public transportation enthusiast, having traveled to more than 45 countries, tracking the various bus, rail, and ferry systems as well as cycle paths in these localities. She is currently teaching contents pertinent to transportation, traffic, and infrastructure at the International Islamic University of Malaysia, Gombak, Kuala Lumpur. She had worked at Town Country Planning Department, Plan Malaysia. She is also a registered town planner with the Malaysian Institute of Town Planning, MIP, and the Lembaga Perancang Bandar Malaysia, LPBM. She is actively engaged with Transportation Science Society Malaysia. She read her PhD at the University of South Australia in Adelaide, majoring in Transportation Systems Engineering, and is now actively undertaking research in both fields. She has co-authored and co-edited several books and papers on urban planning and traffic and transportation planning. Her current interest is comparative studies of transportation revolutions and aspire to experience more new systems across the globe. Okay, Dr. Sharia, the floor is yours.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi, and very good morning to our moderator, Dr. Nurul Azrin. So we have our Prof. Sohana. Thank you for inviting us, for inviting UIA into this forum. And we also have Prof. Datuk Lukman. This is the first time I'm encountering him, but I think I've heard a lot about him from another colleague of mine. So we have very high regards of these two other panels also. So my involvement in this forum is actually to answer three questions. I think the moderator posed me three questions. One regarding Milan, Bogota, Auckland cycling and walking strategies, vehicle pedestrian conflicts and so on, and whether Kuala Lumpur has a very high concentration of public transport, that public transport only concentrates on Kuala Lumpur and not other parts of Malaysia. And I will also respond to questions regarding increasing mobility during COVID-19 with a special focus on reclaiming public spaces. So my kind of presentation today or discussion today is divided into these 5 issues or 5 key points. What is urban mobility, accessibility after the pandemic, and how do we move forward? I would like eventually to share my experiences, both experiences with regard to this COVID. Okay, first, we have seen a lot of urbanization rate coming in, increasing since Merdeka until now, up to 80-90% of urbanization happening in Malaysia. Okay, and then we have greater accessibility now. More and more land uses diversified, but at greater distances. So mobility has been reduced. The more distance we need to travel, of course, the more access we have, access to the facilities or access by the mode of transportation. But mobility has been compromised. Okay, as we increase accessibility, mobility will reduce. But if we reduce accessibility by way of distance, mobility will increase. So, mobility and accessibility works not in parallel. They work actually in different direction, opposite direction. So after the pandemic, what do we do, and how do we move forward? Okay, so I'm going to share with you some things that I've discovered from the internet as well. Comparing Milan, Bogota, Auckland, and KL. Milan has a population of 3 million, Bogota 11 million, Auckland about 500,000, and KL Center, KL Core has about 2 million population. In terms of density, we are talking about 2,000 people per kilometer in Milan, 4,500 in Bogota, 3,000 in Auckland, and as high as 7,000 people in Kuala Lumpur core. I'm not talking about Klang Valley. So measuring the green spaces or public spaces, data has it that Milan offers about 1.4 meters square, 1.4 meters square per person of green spaces or public spaces. Bogota offered less than 1 meter square, especially in the barrios, especially in the informal settlements. So you're talking about your shoulder length and breadth about 0.5 meter. You can only move about like this. Okay, that is per capita of open space. Auckland has quite a high, 5.5 kilometers, 5.5 meters square of open green spaces per capita. And KL in comparison, 1.2 meters squared. So you can imagine when Prof. Dr. Lukman was saying that internal and external ventilation, personal spaces, and so on, and the movement of the COVID viruses and everything, we are talking about we having 1.2 meters squared of public spaces. Anything regarding mobility? Milan has 5 line major subway, 97 kilometer. Bogota has 12 line BRT system, bus rapid transit system, 114 kilometers. Auckland has a Bay Area rapid transit rail base, 211 kilometers. And Malaysia, if we count the MRT as a system as well, so we have 9 lines, 156 kilometers, the trunk, the main trunk, but it can go up to 1,000 kilometers if you're talking about suburban areas. So mobility is very, very high. Accessibility is a problem now. Okay? When we're talking about hierarchy of facilities, Prof. Suhana is talking about urban spaces hierarchy from Padang to Large Park, Titi Wangsa, Tasik Perdana, and then Prof. Dr. Lukman was saying about spaces indoor that we share and conduct the kenduri, conduct all the tahlil and everything. I was thinking about changing or mediating this hierarchy. For example, previously we had door-to-door services. I remember when I was young. Mama Roti comes to our house and he honk his motorcycles honk. Mama datang right to our door and we get the facility. Now we have to go to the hypermarket in order to get those facilities. So can we meet halfway? Can we have back our corner store? Speedmart, 99, Abit Liu Mart. So can we meet halfway in order in order to maintain accessibility while mediating our mobility. Similarly, like we need a small clinic at every neighborhood so that we don't move. I mean, during our MCO, there's a limitation of traveling of 10 kilometers. I, I, I was wondering if urban planners, traffic engineers, architects have ever thought about that when they are planning cities. Okay, that is just an imposition. Okay, of course we have high regards to the medical people, to the health people, but us planners, architects, engineers, we never thought about 10 kilometers. We have the radius, we have the planning guideline, 400 meters, 800 meters, 1.6 meters. We never thought about the viruses when it comes in. And then I'm also trying to respond to public transport, whether it's KL centric or not. Dr. Nurul, can we go to the experiences with my KTM ETS and experiences with our MRT and LRT? My concern is actually, the next slide. Yeah, the next slide. Sorry, the next one. The next. Go forward. Go forward. Yeah, thank you. Forward. Forward. Yeah. Okay. It is not that our public transport in Malaysia is KL centric. We do have a lot of other public transport choices for our suburban people. Okay, and ETS is one of the example. Okay, plenty of room. Oh, this is off peak hours. Of course, this is bias. I'm trying to collect data. How would it be if we are targeting Hari Raya Haji influx and stampede of people going back to their kampung? You can maintain distance here, 1 meter, 5 meter, 10 meters. But I'm not sure once the stampede of people going mudik, kampung and so on, balik kampung. My concern is that we will not be able to maintain such a spacing between people, penjarakan social and everything. And then my experience with MRT, next slide please, and LRT and buses. Okay, this is around 8 a.m. until 9 a.m. People can still maintain standing not close to each other, waiting and being distanced by the seating arrangement. Okay, we have marks on the floor of the buses and the trains. Yeah, we can maintain. But my concern is once everyone got back to work, 100% economic activity rolling, this will be a problem because currently there are passenger limit at platform. For example, we have in Cochrane 17 people only per platform, and in Kajang or in Pasar Seni we can have up to 60 people standing on the platform. On buses during off-peak hour we can have as many as 61 people ability to take and ride the bus, but I'm not too sure during really peak hours. Can we maintain that social distancing? Okay. So what happened is meeting halfway. And I am taking suggestion by Prof. Dr. Lukman and also by Prof. Sohana. Trying to get all these professionals together, sitting at one table of discussion, combining effort, combining expertise and experiences. We never thought of that 10 kilometers. We never thought about that 1 kilometer social distancing minimum and 4, which is optimal. Maybe a review, a looking back at what our policies and guidance so far. I would like to share my personal experience. I was warded. People treated me on the first day as if I had COVID. I had the swab taken from my nose and also from my throat. It was not a good experience. And having discharged, they asked me to stay put at one place. I had 3 choices, either to go back home, kampung, where I have plenty of spaces, or I maintain at my commuting house, going to office easily, or I can go to my father's and mother's, late father and late mother's house, which is about 400 square feet. So 3 choices. I want to stay in a very confined, very small space, or in my kampong where I have two houses connected within half an acre size area? Or do I stay in the city in my commuting, the house I commute to and from going to work and back? So I choose the second one. I choose the middle one. I want to have the facilities. In kampong, I don't have those facilities. I can stay in the apartment in the flat of 400 meters square, but I don't think I think I will be suffering. I have only 200 square feet to move about apart from my bedroom. So can we meet halfway? I was thinking that. And also traveling on the bus and traveling on the train, can we meet halfway? I don't know. Prasarana tried to have a full capacity passengers coming in, but I think ministry and the authorities would not allow such. So currently, I have no idea as to what to do, what engineers, traffic and transport, apart from following what the health industry people are advising us. But I think most of us would like to contribute. We have great designers, we have good engineers as to design and to implement and to propose some of good quality services, medium or means to travel from one place to another, but it has to be halfway. We cannot stop people from traveling. We cannot stop people from socializing. And sekarang ni dah ada dendam kesumat. We cannot travel during Hari Raya Puasa. We definitely going to travel Hari Raya Kurban. So my concern is, please, let's sit together on a table and meet halfway. I think with all that I've grumbled and groused, I think I would like to end my input here. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sharia. I think I will just kick off the discussion with a question directed to you because you just finished and it's fresh in my mind. So you mentioned, okay, meeting halfway, right? You have the Mamak Roti who used to come, and but now we go to hypermarkets, right? So you want to have these concepts of on a store again, right? So halfway. But then, I mean, in residential areas, we already have these commercial spaces, right? Because I think it's part of the design guideline that you have to provide these commercial spaces. But what do you think the problem is actually that we can't really use these commercial spaces as the corner store, I think, as originally intended. So maybe Dr. Suhana can also answer this question. So Dr. Sharia, would you like to start?
Roswana?
You use Google.
Okay. My experience with this hierarchy is that we are imposing guidelines as if it is rules and regulation. Actually, guidelines should be guidelines. There are different natures of people, different culture, different background, different values, different beliefs. Okay, some people believe that corner store, commercial areas within the residential neighborhood does not offer choices, option, alternatives. Okay, goods are limited, so they would prefer hypermarket. And increasing cost of engaging a Grab driver or Grab riders and so on, it may not be so affordable for many of us. Okay, I know of my students who couldn't make even 1,500 ringgit a month with a degree and with a master's degree. So you're also talking about cost of living. While we are trying to meet halfway, there are a lot of limitations. I don't know if we want to allow real mixed use in the neighborhood. One house can also be a residential, can also hold commercial function, can also hold recreational function. But we need space, and that is not what the developers are offering. Yeah, in order to make margins, they cannot afford to offer a single house with a real mixed use, maybe 3 stories, ground floor retail, middle floor maybe residential, and the upper floor maybe a recreational gym center, whatever. I don't think that would be possible. But at a smaller scale, if developers can design, if architects can design, if urban planners can emphasize and impose this while they are regulating and monitoring kebenaran merancang and building permit and so on, I think we can have this one. We can go high density, we can go high rise. It is possible. Okay, so one of the solution with regard to increasing mobility, reclaiming back public spaces in private entities is to allow high rise and to allow real mixed use. The problem is we are having this legislative issue. Okay? We have Kanun Tanah Negara that does not allow all this, especially when it comes to title, Geran Tanah. There need only to be one single use. But I don't know if we can, together with the health industry, yeah, support this idea of real mixed use, then I don't know, maybe one of the solution of reclaiming back those spaces. In larger areas, above neighborhood, we can have a small pekan, a small township. So how do we mix use this? I think most of us are familiar with developers' concept of this urban farm grid iron. I'm not a proponent much of grid iron. It is an American teaching of easily cookie cutting the roads so that we have greater choices of spaces for roads, moving about with by vehicles. Okay, so maybe we can change the tactic. Yeah, we can introduce diagonal, getting from point A to point B. The shortest distance is actually a single line. Yeah, so rather than having a cookie cutter, grid iron, can we have a diagonal road cutting between point A to point B at the end of those grid and at the top of the grid and at the end of the grid?
Okay.
And for concentric urban form, can we have? I think KL is a radial form of urban centers. So rather than people needing to catch a bus, to catch a train in order to go to another suburb, they need to go into the center. Can we have a ring route public transportation strategy rather than all merging into the center? Yeah, we have Pasar Seni, Masjid Jami, museum, KL Central and on. But some of these movements are not concentric. Some of these movements are actually outer or orbital, linking from one suburb to another. Can we change tactic? Rather than people crowding the city in order to interchange, in order to enjoy public spaces, can we link the suburban areas? And that is by orbital or ring road.
Okay.
All the facilities in those suburban areas do not concentrate on the city center.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sharia. Dr. Swana, do you have anything to add to that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Dr. Sharia just now highlighted some interesting point, which is actually related to what I've been saying about the need for a clear hierarchy of public spaces to be provided, so that the distribution of spaces is actually related to the concentration of population where they live, so that you don't have to cross the city in order to go to a park just to bring your children to a playground, for example. I remember in the late 1990s, early 2000, the at that time the Plan Malaysia was called Federal Town and County Planning Department, actually commissioned a project for us to do. They were commissioned to UIA, but I was actually invited to be part of the team for urban design. guidelines for urban image. And I remember in our report we were recommending that the way we design the cities is that it should start from a cluster of 40 people, because in Islam, your neighbors are actually 40 people, and from this grouping of people, each of these cluster of 40 people have a common space for them to use, and also to get to know their neighbors, so that they can do their routine activities to fulfill their needs for recreation. And then it goes further to a bigger grouping of clusters where they have a bigger open spaces right down until the city center. So if you design the cities following this clear hierarchy with clear function of the public spaces, and you design these public spaces to meet the needs, then this problem, when the virus occurs, then the need for people to have access to public spaces for fresh air or green spaces will not arise, as compared to now, where there are certain parts of the residential areas in the city where they don't even access to open spaces. And with the limitation of this 10 kilometer mobility at that time, it's practically like not just being under house arrest, but also being stuck in a concrete jungles, with no access to nature. So that is the point. I think that's why I said sometimes it's a blessing in disguise when we have this pandemic. It's for us to reflect back as to what are our priorities when we build and design our cities. Is it to make the developers rich, getting richer, to have more commercial development, more housing for the upper income group, or is it to provide an environment that will take care of the well-being of the citizen in the process of building the cities? As far as urban design is concerned, we are also questioning the kind of quality of design that we have in the city center, where we don't have proper streets, whereby the cities are being designed for the cars to pass through. And during the lockdown, cars cannot move, and then we will find that there's no places for us to walk. So reclaiming back the streets, as what has been done in other parts of the world, like you mentioned just now, Milan and Bogota, actually is very timely now that we review back as to giving back the streets to the people instead of just to the cars. But that will raise some problem in the form of vehicular access. And if the streets are walkable, I believe that people will walk. The problem that there is also this notion that people always say Malaysians are so lazy to walk. It's a chicken and egg situation. Are we born to be lazy to walk, or do we blame our country for having a tropical climate that makes us doesn't want to walk in the sun? But why can't we have think outside the box, or have a paradigm shift and think that we are stuck with the climate? We cannot change Malaysia to become a temperate climate. I think there's no we can never blame the climate for the way we build our cities, and that means we are focusing on indoors, introvert kind of environment, where we are favoring for mechanical ventilated public spaces, or even now we even have theme parks in indoor, like the Times Square, Soundway Pyramid,
Genting.
Genting and so on. I mean we are not actually designing our cities for the climate and weather that we have. We are designing for the climate that we can never have, and we have to spend more money, to ventilate the building, and then what happens, we make the streets hotter, because when you have air conditioned buildings, then all the heat will be discharged onto the streets, and the more people will not walk on the streets, and that will actually lead to further crime happening in the streets. I mean it's like it's like a Pandora box. You know, the problem are all interrelated. So I think it's about time that the local authorities sit down. We all of us, the professionals involved in the development, sit down and reflect back. You know, give back the cities to the people. Now that cars are no longer useful in terms of this pandemic, then we don't even have to need to drive. I even have my road tax for 3 months. I didn't know it's already expired because I don't need to drive the car. So maybe now we should think that now the streets no longer need to be a place for communication. Then part of the streets can be given back to the people as a public space. And then we can have the landscape or architects to come in to design the using the street furnitures and the landscape elements to make the streets now to give back, especially in Malaysia when we have the lack of public spaces. So this is about time that we change our attitude towards the design of streets. You know, I think I do not see the city centre. We are designing streets in the cities. We are just designing roads. We just for the purpose of the cars to pass through. If you are thinking about streets, then it's a setting. It's a behavioural setting for activities to take place, and that's why Paris is so famous for its street culture, because they are designing the streets for these activities to take place. And also going back to that, we also need to be very serious and committed about public transportation. Because in the developed country, the rich takes public transport. Their public transport becomes the major mode of transportation instead of the cars. If we continue with our attitude of using cars as our means of transport, we will never solve this problem. Because the more cars coming into the streets, the more the more highways you have to build. Now it's not just a elevated highway; we have triple elevated highways. You know, when are these going to stop? You know, building more roads doesn't solve the problem.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Swana, for that. We'll now take some questions from the participants. And this is, I think, more for Prof. Lokman. What is the impact of COVID-19 towards kids and their outdoor spaces? Do you have any insights on that?
Can you repeat that question again?
What is the impact of COVID-19 towards kids, children?
Children.
Yeah, and also their outdoor spaces.
They have the lowest group of people at risk of the infection. I mean, if you look at the statistic, kids are not the main problem. They don't, even if they are infected, they don't suffer the severe form of infection. It's not the main issue. The issue is with us, the elderly. Of course, they go to school. They can enjoy the school life, like any other student. Even, I mean, with regard to, to the extent that, for example, to me, there's no real need for the social distancing even at school, if you're talking about the risk to the children. But the problem is, they may get infected, they don't suffer, but they come back to their house, and that's exposing to the elderly. That's the issue. So that's the strategy of trying to manage as best as possible. But I think whatever it has to be pragmatic. I mean, to what level that you want to do certain things that you might even at the end of the day impact the total livelihood of the people. I think that's crazy. And just take, for example, the example of the tukang gunting rambut. The issue of not allowing them to. If you understand the route of transmission, and the risk is as like any other profession. I mean, in terms of the risk, they are not as bad as the medical doctors in the world. But the way they put the SOP, as if the risk of the bubble getting infection, just like the specialists working in the ICU, they have to gown out, totally gown using all the face mask patient. I think the pragmatism must be there in developing any public policies with regard to any health issues. Or even like, for example, crowding, I mean, transportation and the crowd. in the LRT. How fast can you address the problem if you want to address the problem? You can't. But what best do you are telling the public? Wear the mask. That's the only way. So, I mean, what can we do with that? We can't. All right. But in the future, when you're planning for that, probably yes. But now, we're looking at the situation. I think we have to understand the risk that we are facing, and we try to manage that risk. The concept of just now we were raised about the limit of movement during calamity and how we plan for that. I think these are important, yes, because in the context of not only for COVID, but in general, we're talking about the access to utilities and other services for the public, at the same time managing the efficiency of the person. Look at public clinic, for example, government's clinic, crowded like hell. I mean, during my time, we already been discussing about going back to the old days of having polyclinics, where we ran the shop houses and put our doctors just like our clinics of Malaysia now. The old days, that was a practice. But then come the thinking that in terms of cost efficiency, when you're managing the resources, better it's good to be centralized, where you have all the facilities and rather to be spread out like that. So there's always the economic side of it that sometimes we need to put into picture. But in terms of efficiency and others, all right. But in terms of accessibility, I think we need to relook at how we plan in terms of the need for the public. I noticed that for school, somehow they are very good. Every new community development areas, there will be plan for school, but not for clinics. I do not know why. We in the Ministry of Health, it's always hard to find space for us to build a clinic. At the end, we have to buy from a private entity, and that increases cost. So I think probably again, I'm thinking like, to me, urban planning is so important, and health element is so important in this world. I strongly suggest that a subset of the urban planner should refocus. Take a special interest in public health and having a clear, dedicated professional development career path for this group of people, where after their basic degree, they will go pursue to do a public health program to understand better about what public health is all about. And because for us to create a committee after committee, sometimes it depends on who sit on the committee. And that's where the problem is. But if you start from the very fundamental knowledge of it, and you develop from there, and urban planner have this strong basic foundation of public health, I think that's the best way to move forward in the future.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Lokman. So I think then that relates to my next question. This is for both Dr. Sharia and Prof. Swada again, because you are both educators. In your experience teaching design, did health consideration actually play a big part in design education? And research-wise, was health ever a major consideration in urban design? So approaches like placemaking and concepts like place attachment, for example, they often focus more on how the physical environment provides a setting for urban activities, and this would then influence the character of the place. How does health come into all of this? Do you think this discourse will change in the design schools?
Okay, very simple answer is no. To be frank, urban health has never been an issue, but when we were talking about sustainable urban design, it is considered impartial, but not necessarily as a focus. But then in urban design, our concern in as far as research and even 30 is about the well-being, which is also part of health. Like this now, the development was saying is now, health is not just about disease. There's a mental health and well-being. It's also part of health. So in urban design, yes, we do. We are much quite concerned about the effects of the environment in terms of the well-being of the people, and how the environment actually influence the perception and behavior, which actually can in the end uh, affects their well-being and mental health. But it's not very direct as we would like. But I think with this pandemic issue, then probably they will be quite a popular subject to take as a research. But I think that's why in for those involved in the planning of the city, it's very important to consider the well-being of people as part of the determining factor in the way you design or plan the cities. Because of course you don't die from not having good access to the open spaces, but you can get depressed, and depression can lead to a very poor mental health and well-being. Just imagine those people during the Selangor Mansion residents. You can see that they are already at the brink of getting going insane as a result of being locked down and not having the ability to go out from their already crowded and cramped tenements. So in urban design, our concern about safety is also part related to health. When the issue that I was talking about, making our streets walkable, giving back the streets to people, is that because at the moment, if you look at our city centres, the streets are not walkable. Walkable in the sense that it's not comfortable to walk and also not safe. And then safety in the form of you being a victim of petty crime like handbag snatching can also affect your well-being, your mental, because depression is very much linked to this. And also being knocked down by vehicles if you ever try to cross it. And then sometimes there are so many accidents, little accidents occurring as a result of the pavements are not actually suitable for those not just disabled, for those people, the elderly, the children. And you can see some of the curbs are too high, and then people can just easily trip down. So that is also can affect health, because once you trip down, you can even break your ankles and so forth, and then you will be warded in the hospital. So I think yes, we do actually look into this matter, but not as a direct issue as now when it talks about this pandemic. So I think I can see the trend will change after this.
Dr. Sharia, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, as a town planner and also as a transport planner, I'm looking at this, in responding to that question, I'm looking at this from three perspectives. One, we have planning guidelines. It has been inputted. It has some contribution from the Health Ministry. We are also looking at from the Kanun Tanah Negara, the titling of the land, and also from the Kebenaran Merancang, and how routes of public transportation are planned. Okay. First, the planning guidelines says that if we have 800 people, we will allocate land for school, if primary school. If we have 1,600 people, we will allocate for one secondary school. In terms of clinics, if we have more than, say, 800 housing, then we may provide one allocation of clinics, and needing 100,000 or 150,000 for hospital. So the guideline is there. But I don't know whether it has been updated up to recent pandemic event or not. The problem is guideline is based on population and also based on radius distance. Yeah, we have never encountered where decisions being made based on the transmission of the viruses. So we never learn about 1 meter, 4 meter and possibility of the viruses to stay on surfaces by 3 days, 2.5 hours, and so on. So those guidelines have never been receiving any input on those methods. So that is part and parcel why we are currently having this kind of mismatch in facilities and also the demand for their facilities. Kebenaran merancang will follow the guideline. Most of the local authorities use these guidelines as a Bible. Reduce the question from the public, reduce local standard, all the court cases and everything if we just follow the guideline. Okay, so that is the stand. Okay, we have the SOP, we follow, then reduce question, reduce issues, reduce conflict, and so on. From the Kanun Tanah Negara, most of the developments are actually developers driven. We have very limited land bank where the owners are the municipal council, the owners are the state government, or the owners are federal government. So if it's developers driven, of course, we are looking only for margin profit. To turn a space, to allocate land for clinics, for hospitals, and so on requires a lot of, it is an Achilles heel. It is a lot of effort. It's like climbing mountain. Clinic, hospital does not generate profit. Okay, and then the question of titling. When developers allocate the land for public facilities, including clinic, they lose the land. They lose the land. When it is subdivided, they lose the title. They lose the ownership and the right to develop. So when it's serah balik punya semula, they will never get back the land. Now we are wondering, if the land is serah balik punya semula to the authority, will the authority surely 100% develop it for clinic? We have cases, public open spaces been surrendered to the government, and somehow condominium of 40 stories, 50 stories coming up at the very location site, allocated for public spaces. So that's the concern there. And for public transport routing, my concern is that we have routing of radial in nature, not orbital in nature. That's why all the routes are actually going towards and outwards of the city center. Whereas large hospital and very sensitive areas of health facilities are actually located at the outer suburban areas because of the land value and land availability. So what they can do, instead of the rail servicing this very sensitive development, they can have the feeder buses servicing this area. I think I tried and tested T401 and T400. They both go through HUKM, Pediatrics Hospital, and all the area in Cheras under. But that is not the nodes, not the terminal of the public transit. It just passes through. So what we have in developed countries, the main nodes of public transportation, the starting point or the end point of a single bus route is actually these users. I've experienced in Adelaide, J1, J7, J5, their main terminal is shopping complex, and the route they are traversing are actually public facilities. They don't go into the city center. So we have these facilities, we have this routing plan in some of the developed countries. So I just need the authorities or the people making decisions to tweak their mind a little bit, changing the nature of thinking that due to expensive land, scarcity of land, some of the very sensitive health facilities need to be located out the suburb. But facilitating through transportation, increasing the accessibility, reducing the mobile or mobility is very important. So rather than have radial type of routing, can we have orbital type of routing of these feeder buses, small buses, stage buses, and so on? Because rail cannot serve hospital. It's very sensitive. Hospital is very sensitive environment. We cannot compromise the noise, the vibration, and everything, especially the noise pollution, air pollution, and so on. So buses is the best mobility means to get to these facilities. But they need to be determined. They need to be the node center, origin and destination of the routing. I think from those two perspectives I have looked, hopefully it answers the question of our audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sharia. So we are already over with the time, but So I would like to get final words from each of the speaker. What would be, if our viewers here today were to take one takeaway point from this session, what would be it from your perspective, from your expertise? So let's start with Prof. Lokman.
Okay, thank you very much. I think one thing good about COVID is that it urged us to start practicing what we've been thinking about practicing for a long time. It looked like teaching, for example, in my current work now. We always thought that the student can learn in many ways, and online teaching is one way that we should be promoting and using lots of this technology, the virtual reality technology, in enhancing the knowledge and skill of the student. We have been thinking about that for a long time, but not much investment we made. But now with COVID, start asking us to stop all those plenaries and what's not. The universities are now moving in this new direction. So there's a lot of other things that probably we need to relook at how we're doing. When you say, for example, we have been not taking help input in developing or planning for urban or any structure in that format. But I think we look back to history. The British did very well in planning the Kuala Lumpur in the early days. Now, when they built up the residence for the colonial masters in Bukit Tungku, they put up the malaria drain to prevent the spread of malaria. So they understood the risk and they managed the risk. And that drain remains until today in Bukit Tungku. You have to look at it. Meaning they already put the help in their planning. Similarly, the TB ward in the old days. During my early years as a medical doctor, my first year's posting for hospital, our TB ward was so nice, huge building, very high ceiling, no walls, with the sliding windows, and the air just flows like that. And that's how you manage respiratory infection. But nowadays, look at our hospital. And look at our, so these are, to me, it's just a matter whether we now remember health and take health into account in our planning. And we start to forget about the basic principle and fundamental of life. I think that's my parting message. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Sharia?
Thank you very much. I have three ideas actually. In order to empathize, in order to sympathize with whoever is impacted by COVID-19, can we try using the public transport for 1 month non-stop? Can we try using the public transport, if not 1 month, 1 week, non-stop? Try having some respiratory problem and going to the clinic during MCO. They are not providing services for nebulation and so on. Somehow you are suspected to carry viruses. You've been quarantined. That was the experience I had. It opens up my eyes. And try living in a space of 100 square feet on average. These are what 70% of our population are experiencing. Most of us in KL and Klang Valley are living in housing or dwelling of 600 square feet, maximum 1,000 square feet, shared by 6 people, 10 people. So decision makers, if you're making decisions, if you're making policies, directing this, enforcing this, try and put yourself in these people's shoes. 1 week, 1 month, try public transport, non-stop. Try being warded, try being quarantined, and try living in a space of 100 square feet, which is less than 9 meters square. Sorry, 90 meters square. 9 meters square, sorry.
Right,
then you will feel your decision making, whether they are efficient, effective, or otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, that's very provocative. So, Dr. Sona, last words?
I think Dr. Shara's comments just now give me not just give, I think validate some of the uh, presumptions that I had all this while about how who is actually the real planners in Malaysia. I don't think the one who really plan our cities are the qualified planners who actually got a degree in town and country planning, who are actually being trained to design, to plan the cities, to consider the needs of the society, and with also considering the economic situation and the conditions of the physical environment. I think the real planners are the developers. They are actually the one who is making decision in this country, and it reflects in the quality of the environment that we have. That's why it's very stringent in the form of giving green open spaces to the people, because like Dr. Sharia said, it don't bring money. There is no profit involved in building clinics, or even to have a playground. Sometimes the playground actually leftover spaces that they cannot accommodate the housing units, and that becomes the play areas. And sometimes it's been stuck in a very awkward location that is not even accessible to those living there. So in the end, the parents cannot take their children to for their to the playgrounds for the daily needs in terms of access to open spaces, and this in return in the end will affect the well-being and the mental health of our future generation. So I think it's about time that we give the job of planning to the real people, the one who is actually, and another person who's actually planning for the cities are also the politicians. So the politician and the developers are actually the real planners in this country. So um I don't know. I think there's also another problem, but I think it's about time that the politicians also reflect back now. What is their the real purpose of becoming a politician? Are you there to serve the public, or are you there just to reap the? But it's not a problem trying to reap benefits of being a politician, but do your job to serve the people. Now we are not creating cities that actually providing for the needs, especially now with the COVID-19 issue, access to public spaces, access to nature and outdoor greens is now becoming a necessity to prevent people from going insane, being locked in a very crowded situation. So, and because as President of Perika Bandar, I also now pledge that the local authorities, please think about urban design in the way you plan your cities. It's not enough to provide facilities without the quality coming into it, and that's when urban design is very important. I think I've already mentioned just a lot, but I think my take home message is that we can see what is the difference between us being in the third world or developing world in terms of the quality of cities and those in the developed world, is that they design their cities. They put quality to the environment as compared to us. We just plan, but even then sometimes the plans doesn't turn out as we actually want it to be, and we provide the quantity. So I like the use of the term, can we meet halfway? Can we at least give some attention to design, so that we can have better quality cities in the future.
Okay. Right.
Nurul, but
Yeah.
probably the last word.
Tapi make it short,
Even though
okay?
even though the cities are very well planned, but you must behave with COVID. Just look at your cities, how bad they are in terms of COVID. Your cities are well planned, but when you don't behave, you don't. I mean, you don't take social responsibility as a very important aspect in life. That's problem. So I think we have to be
But they're civilized.
in our approach to things. All right, thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you everyone for making the time. Thank you to the panelists, for spending your Saturday morning with us, and to the participants. I don't know if you're still there. We are almost 20 minutes over over the time we promised. But well, that is a lesson to be learned for the next time. So thank you everyone, and have a nice weekend. Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.